All right, Derek. Biggest takeaway from day one in Dallas, we had Ole Miss, we had South Carolina, we had Vandy, we had LSU in action today. What was the thing that throughout all of this craziness of SEC Media Days, the spectacle that kind of stood with you throughout this first Monday?
Yeah, Ole Miss sticks with me. I think Harold Perkins was probably the biggest storyline from the teams that went today, just because of Brian Kelly joking to you that he wished he would have strapped him down and made him eat more.
Standard quote from Brian Kelly if you think about it. Yeah.
And everybody wants to know, like, okay, how's the LSU defense going to look under Baker? And LSU doesn't seem to have any interest in telling us. And everybody wants to know what Perkins is going to be doing. So I think he was a big draw just looking at him. But I was curious to see how Lane Kiffin and his players would approach the messaging today. Because there were a number of different directions that they could go. Everybody expects them to be a very good team. I expect them to be a very good team. A lot of us expect them to contend for a playoff spot. And sort of be in a position that the program just hasn't really been in. And, for a roster like what Kiffin has, where so much of it has been built through the portal, you're sort of like patchworking your culture and hoping that the pieces that you add aren't going to change anything about that culture. And to get something that is going to be conducive to a title run is probably pretty finicky. It's a pretty fine needle to thread. But I kind of get the sense that Lane has maybe done it. The messaging today was just all about work. We don't care what you're saying. We don't care where you put us. Somebody asked Jared Ivey. It is Jared, right?
Jared Ivey. Yeah, former Georgia Tech transfer.
First year. Don't. I'm trying not to kill him. I'm trying not to get killed. Someone asked him, like, what's going to look different? Like, what do you remember about the Georgia game? I think it was your question.
I asked that, yeah.
What's going to look different? And, like, he made the comment that, like, there were things that night that they could build on, but then he also said that no one's going to outwork us this year. And something Trey Harris said, that he's already been out to Los Angeles multiple times to work out with Jackson Dart. And then Kiffin, just sort of being like, we have to prove it. And there are so many things that we still have to do. I just liked that messaging, and I like that messaging for the coach of him being like, hey, even on the plane ride out here, I'm talking to the guys about, like, this means nothing. What they're about to tell you means nothing. We have to work, we have to earn it, we have to prove it. And I just like that messaging, and I felt a little bit more confidence in sort of expecting Ole Miss to be what I expect them to be.
Isn't it interesting that this is the first time Lane is going to have a team this highly ranked since 2012 USC? I was talking to Michael Katz about this, about how you almost get the sense that Lane knows that, and it's this mental hurdle for him to be able to get over, because the way that 2012 USC played out was so horrific. As Michael Katz brought up, he's like, yeah, you start off number one in the country and then you end the season in El Paso. Like, that's just not the way that you draw it up. And if Ole Miss does anything short of that, we've talked about this throughout the offseason, it will be seen as a disappointment. I always wonder if a coach is going to come into this setting at Media Days and you're going to know. You're going to get this sense of, oh, they're really confident. They love their team. The example I always give is 2021 Kirby Smart. That was the first time I really saw Kirby come out of his shell and speak freely and like not be afraid to make jokes. He brought up how Quavo was instructing them about NIL. Oh, don't be thirsty. It was the advice from Quavo. And you're like, who is this guy in front? And I look back and think Kirby Smart knew he had a really good team. I think Lane is taking a different approach. You almost get the sense, and at least I did, maybe you can correct me here, does Lane sound a little bit like Saban when he is trying to be serious about stuff? Like, he has like these Sabanisms that'll come out, and like he is downplaying it. And he's not doing the I'm going to build my team up. He's not doing the get your popcorn ready or all that. But I got that sense from him that he was very much trying to downplay this in the way that his, obviously former boss did better than anybody in the history of the sport.
Well, and still did today by not saying on Monday by not having Alabama in his title picks.
Saban
Network.
Yeah.
I think that was a little pointed. Not, I think there was a lot of truth to it, but I also think there's a little bit of subliminal messaging there. But yeah, I would agree with you on that front, that I could see Lane doing the same thing. When you're telling your team, we still have so much work to do, you're sending them a message. And so many coaches will use availabilities and press conferences and just meetings with the media to send their team a message. And saying, hey, we still have to work. Like, we still have to do this. We still have to prove this. That is, I would agree with you. I think Lane was using today as an opportunity to continue speaking to his team and continue sort of setting the tone for what fall camp is going to be for them, and setting the tone for like where the headspace needs to be heading into the start of this season.
If you had taken a drink every time you heard rat poison or the mention of Texas or Oklahoma, how are they going to fit in the SEC? I think Texas and Oklahoma mentions would have gotten you drunker. I definitely think that. What was the pre-Texas and Oklahoma conversation? Because it felt like, some of these questions that were coming in, like there was, I'm not going to name names of who said this, but the question to Clark Lee about Vandy having a winning record against Texas, and they're like 8-3 all time. Oh, they haven't played since the 1920s, by the way. And Clark Lee's like, what are we doing here? But there were a lot of questions about Texas and Oklahoma. Did it feel like they were getting the proper due, the proper respect, or was this more of like, we're still kind of looking at this with an eyebrow raised?
Let me preface this. I went to school at Oklahoma. I grew up going to Nebraska-Texas games. I grew up in a Nebraska household. So I have been born and brought up through a lot of Texas hatred.
You have a horns down tattoo on your neck. That's not true. I'm just kidding.
I have one tattoo and it's not that. I try to be as objective as I can with Texas in this context, in the professional context. But it was funny to me today to listen to some of the like, hey, talk about how good Texas is. Hey, talk about Texas being able to come into this conference and be successful right away. Hey, talk about what you like about Texas. And then listening to some of the Oklahoma people that I know from when I lived there approach the same sort of angle as, what can Oklahoma expect? Hey, what's a night game in Death Valley like? It was just very funny to me. And someone had made the comment, and it got Saban off on a tangent, about Texas running the Big 12. And it was a question to Greg Sankey, and it was, how do you expect Texas to fit in? And Sankey was like, well, they're going to fit in. This is the SEC. And I think the Texas ran the Big 12 comment was maybe taken a little bit.
I don't know if that's what it was
literally.
Yeah, I don't know that that's what anybody was trying to say.
Not in the sense of them winning a bunch of championships, because we know Oklahoma did that. Not in the sense of them being super competitive and winning a ton in the Big 12, because we know of late, minus last season, they didn't do a ton of that. But Texas was very influential in the Big 12 offices, and Texas was all about wanting the Texas way. It's what drove Nebraska out of the conference. It's what drove Colorado and A&M and Missouri away from the conference, was this fear of Texas running things in the Big 12.
Yeah.
And that's just sort of been the Texas mindset. And now that, Texas has made a college football playoff, I think Texas is a very storied program, and I think Texas has a right to puff its chest a little bit. They should have a very good team this year. I think they can challenge for not just an SEC title, but a spot in the college football playoff and a spot in the national championship. I think they have that good of a team. But it was just kind of interesting listening to the two different approaches.
Very different.
Knowing what I know about the school. But I will say, Oklahoma's not in a place where they're going to contend for an SEC title right away and they're going to contend for a national championship. They're just not in that place. So Oklahoma having a more like, hey, what should OU fans expect? Hey, what's the game day atmosphere going to look like? That approach like makes more sense to me. And I wrote about this before the thing. I was like, I want to see if there's going to be some modesty, some grace, or a little bit of confidence from some of these, from these newcomers as they come in.
Will Sark have a cowboy hat on? Please. That's all we ask for. We don't ask for much.
Right?
I mean,
we saw Ole Miss players with cowboy hats.
They all have cowboy hats.
Brian Kelly had a cowboy hat on when he was riding the bull.
Riding the bull, wearing a cowboy hat when in Dallas. This is just what you do, apparently. I think that was like, and it's interesting that Saban said, Texas is going to come in here and run the SEC, and I think he's saying that from a diplomatic perspective. And Saban has perhaps firsthand experience of knowing what that is like with those important people at Texas and saying, like, hey, you're not going to necessarily do this, this, and this. The whole rumored, Saban like is going to go to Texas thing. But I think at the same time, like Saban has Texas in his SEC championship, and he has Georgia in his SEC championship, and it does feel very different to be predicting stuff like that and to actually have to factor this in. And it's going to feel a little bit more real when Texas and Oklahoma are here in the middle of the week. They of course haven't spoken yet or done anything of that nature. But I was waiting for the take of like Texas is going to go 7-5. They don't know what they're in for. I didn't see any of that. I think there's a lot of respect for Texas, and I think that's okay. I'm not crazy. Like I'm not crazy about the anti-Texas takes.
Because I think if you did that, you would be like it'd be like me letting my haterade come through. Like it would just not be objective. It'd be you hating on Texas because it's fun to hate on Texas.
It would be you letting your neck tattoo. Your neck tattoo would be showing if you did.
Trying to get me in trouble. It's on the back. You can't see it. This is not a 5-loss team. And like, as kind of, as much as I don't want to go there, like even if Quinn Ewers isn't okay, I think we all think they have a pretty good backup quarterback.
I've heard of him.
That can come in and do some things and maybe steady a ship if a ship gets a little rocky. Like this is going to be a really good football team. Now, one thing that I'm really curious to ask about is how they plan to replace the two big guys in the middle of the defensive line. That's a big issue, and we heard multiple coaches today talk about how like one of the differentiators between the SEC and other leagues is the size and the length, particularly at the line of scrimmage. When you've got two players like a Sweat and like a Murphy that Texas had, they're just hard players to replace in general. You would have probably, if you're Texas, you would have liked to have those guys for this year. That would have made a difference. But even having to replace them, like Texas has done well in recruiting under Sark. Sark has an identity and a clearly established culture. And who was it today that said that he was one of the toughest coordinators to game plan?
Clark Lee was talking about that. When Clark Lee was at Notre Dame, and he talks about how when Alabama faced Notre Dame it was weird because it wasn't the Cotton Bowl, it was like the Rose Bowl.
It was the Rose Bowl.
But they played it in Texas. Yeah, because it was COVID. And he said it was one of the most unique offenses I've ever had to prepare for, and that's a testament to Sark. Like that is what he's going to bring to the table, and that's why the floor feels very high. It feels very high when you've recruited this well, and we've actually seen the proof of concept. So I think Texas and Oklahoma are going to dominate conversation all week. It was interesting hearing Greg Sankey say that they had talked about having SEC Media Days in Dallas in 2018, and that they didn't do it. It just didn't necessarily work. They ended up having it in Atlanta there. But SEC Media Days in Oklahoma City, nobody's brought that up yet. Underrated Oklahoma City. My guy Chris Plank's been telling me.
You'd have it at the Devon Tower? Is that where you would do it?
Sure, that sounds like a place.
Where you can see nothing but flat outside behind you?
Yeah. They would take us to a Thunder game. Like not a Thunder game because they probably wouldn't be playing basketball in the middle of July. That's not how that works. But
see the Thunder practice facility.
See the practice
facility. See the old converted dog food facility.
Oh yeah. Okay. Sure. I'm on board. But like the globalization of it, like Sankey. I mean, trust me, if you can't go down the street and find like 6 different fast food places that you would want to go to in any major U.S. city, like what are you really doing? Well, like Sangy talks about how the regionalization of the SEC, like wanting to branch out, wanting to have Texas and Oklahoma, feel like they are ingrained in the SEC. They're going to fit in perfectly. It'll be interesting to see how they fit in this year. I am so interested in that. I know we have talked so much about it, but if we're fast forwarding 4 months from now, let's get your official prediction on the record. It's talking season now. What's the overall vibe of Texas and Oklahoma post year 1 in the SEC? Is it 0 being like Jim getting through a snowball fight with Dwight and the very famous image of him in the office just looking disheveled, he's got like blood all over his face? That's like a 0. Or a 10 is like Stanley on pretzel day.
Vibe being like within the program, vibe the fan base, people outside.
Fan base. Let's go fan base.
Pretzel. Stanley on pretzel day.
It's an elite feeling. It's a 1 in 365.
They're just in 2 different spots, so I think like it's not like I think both are going to be a solid like 5 to 7, 6 to 8 in that range. I think both are going to be happy. I don't think OU is going to be bad, but I don't think OU is going to be awesome. And I don't think Texas is going to be. I don't think Texas is going to be bad.
Bold. Preseason national champion favorite. Texas confirmed not bad.
So I don't. They've just been preparing for this for so long. I think so much of this season is going to feel like a celebration to a lot of these fan bases. Now, maybe Brent Venables feels differently. Like after the season, maybe he's a lot closer to like Jim looking disheveled at the desk, like with blood on his face. Maybe he's. But even then, like, I think that OU's in pretty good shape on the defensive line and the front 7. Bill Biedenbau's got, as good a reputation as an offensive line coach as anyone.
We got motorcycles going outside the Airbnb right now.
We got a lot of people that like to rev their engines outside.
Nothing says that you are a man more than revving your engine just random times.
So I think they're going to be pretty, I think they'll be pretty pleased. Texas has a pretty decent schedule. I don't know if you've seen.
Yep, heard about it.
Oklahoma has a fun schedule.
That's one way to put it.
Well, I say fun because, like, I was talking to my father-in-law who loves to attend OU games. He lives in the area. He can't wait for OU Alabama. He can't wait for Alabama fans to be on campus.
Yeah.
He can't wait for that atmosphere. And there's a level of this where, it's not to, just like stoke the egos of SEC fan bases, but this is just not what OU has been used to. It's just not what Texas has been used to. There are programs that just don't take it as seriously or haven't taken it as seriously.
It doesn't mean more.
It doesn't mean more. And it's just like, it's like the big leagues. And I think that there's a lot of people within both of the fan bases that are super excited about having that weekly atmosphere. Like every single Saturday, it's going to be a fun Saturday. Now, it might not end fun, but like it's going to be an adventure and an experience and a memorable experience. So I think I said this, you had me on a podcast previously, and I said I think OU could win 8 or 9 games. I think they could also win 7 games and label it a good season, or 6 games and label it a good season.
They won't label it a good season if they win 6 games. They won't. Some might look at some of the games that they win and say, didn't expect that. If they go 6-6, that will not be labeled a good season.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, okay.
If it ends in El Paso.
Well, it's not starting at number 1, so we don't have that big a gap this time.
True.
Okay, yeah, okay. I've got OU fans yelling at me. They're not going to go 6-6. I don't think they're going to go 6-6, but like, I think there's an element of this where it's just going to be a little bit of a celebration this season. So I don't think anybody's going to be like just absolutely hating life, sitting at their desk, disassociating. Like, we should go back to the Big 12. Like, that's not going to happen.
No Nebraska syndrome.
Now they tell you they don't even have Nebraska syndrome.
I think they're very different. Both you and I can speak to that very much. Very different mindsets of reasons for expansion or realignment, all that stuff, and at extremely different places in their fandom. So we don't even have to go down that road.
Here's the thing that I'm most interested to find from, and I might not get this answered over the next 2 days, but I'm gonna try. How difficult do they expect it to be to prepare for this season? Because I talked to people who prepared for a conference switch previously, and it was a coaching staff that was not super thrilled about the conference switch happening. And in preparation for the new season, it was a lot of like, we have 11 non-conference games. We have 12 non-conference games. Like, this is absurd. And the amount of time that we have to invest to get ready for the season is just on a completely different level from anything that we've experienced before.
There is something to be said for that. No tendencies whatsoever. Like, yeah, Sark faced Bama last year, but at the same time, it's like, all right, well, you still have a new coaching staff to be able to prepare for.
You have no tape or commonality to pull from. Is that a challenge? Or, like, is it different now because of maybe the transfer portal and because of how teams can change year to year? Texas obviously has the Alabama game that they can pull from, but, like, Oklahoma has nothing. What's that like? I would like to get that answered. I don't know if I'm going to get that answered, but that, to me, is the most interesting thing heading into this for those two.
Derek, great stuff. Where are you at on the tweets these days? It's something Petey.
It's just Dr. Petey.
Dr. Petey.
I don't really tweet. It was a couple, like, fever tweets during Copa America. But, like...
So don't follow Derek on Twitter is basically what he's saying.
Every time I get on Twitter, I get sad.
Yeah.
Makes me sad.
That's fair.
So.
That's fair. All right. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.